let's continue with the skull. So we have the ethmoid bone right here. The ethmoid bone is an internal bone. So the ethmoid bone is seen right here. You can also see the ethmoid bone right here on this plastic skull. This is a real skull here, so you can see the ethmoid bone. Now the ethmoid bone, if you look at it, it's an internal bone, and you can see the ethmoid bone right in here. So here's the ethmoid bone. Here's the lacrimal bone right here, a small bone, and this little depression here is called the lacrimal fossa. And this, remember, is the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. So greater wing of sphenoid bone, and we can see this structure here is the superior orbital fissure and inferior orbital fissure. So the ethmoid bone can be seen right here as well. Now you can also see the ethmoid bone right in here as well. This is the perpendicular plate. So let me show you the crista galla. So the crista galla is right here. This is the crista galla right here. And we can see the crista galla right here as well on this skull. Here's the crista galla and crista galla. We have the cribriform plate right here. Notice that you have spongy bone right here. And that's going to be for good reason, because the fibers of the olfactory bulb, of the olfactory nerve, are going to go right through these, through this spongy bone, the cribriform plate. So this is the cribriform plate here and here. So we see that. Hopefully you can see that. And here's the cribriform plate as well. Now I've already showed you the perpendicular plate, which is right here. The perpendicular plate is going to articulate with this structure right here called the vomer bone. And you can see right here on this real skull that the perpendicular plate is missing, probably due to students handling the skull. And it's also very fragile. So the perpendicular plate on this skull is missing. You can see it right here on this plastic skull. The perpendicular plate articulates with the vomer bone. Now, we have the middle nasal concha. Now the middle nasal concha is right here. Come on. Right here is your middle nasal concha, as well as right here, middle nasal concha. And then right here is the inferior nasal concha, here and here. So middle nasal concha and inferior nasal concha. Now I've already showed you this already. So we have the lacrimal bone, which is a small bone. And then we have the little depression here called the lacrimal fossa. See this depression here? Hopefully you do. And on this real skull here, we can see the lacrimal bone and the lacrimal fossa right there. Now, we have the zygomatic bone right here on the cheekbone. And this right here is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. nasal bone is right here. Here's your nasal bone. Vomer bone right here, which is going to articulate with the perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone. You can also see the vomer bone on this side right here, on the inferior part of the skull. So right in here would be the vomer bone. And we have the maxilla bone. So the maxilla bone is a pretty big bone. Well, we can see it right here. So the maxilla bone is going to go from here all the way, and you see it. So this is the maxilla bone. And we have some features. We have the alveolar processes. That's these processes here. You can see them in the real skull. Alveolar processes. Okay. We have the palatine process. Palatine process is going to be this structure right here. Forms the palate. Palatine process. And then we have the palatine bone right here, which is going to articulate with the palatine process of your maxilla bone. We have the incisive fossa. That's this structure right here. So here's the incisive fossa right here. And we have the inferior orbital fissure. So here is the inferior orbital fissure. Right here. And right here. The maxilla bone. And then we have the infraorbital foramen. Now, the infraorbital foramen is right here, as well as right here. So infraorbital foramen here, and here. Here, and here. And then we have the inferior orbital fissure, again here and here. And the superior orbital fissure here and here. And then we have the infraorbital foramen here and here. And remember, the superior orbital foramen is right here and right here on the frontal bone. And I think we are finished with the maxilla. So let's move on to the palatine bone. The palatine bone, as I've already mentioned, is right here. Here's your palatine bone. Palatine bone, right there. Okay, now we're going to look at the sutures again. And I've already showed you the sutures, but we're going to go over them again. So, we can see looking at the skull from a superior view, we'll see the frontal bone, two parietal bones, and we have the coronal suture here, and the sagittal suture right here. And then let's look at the skull from this angle here. So right here you can see the two parietal bones again, the occipital bone here, and you can see the lambdoid suture, which separates the two parietal bones from the occipital bone. So this is the lambdoid suture. And then right here, you can see the squamous suture, which separates the parietal bone from the temporal bone. Parietal bone, temporal bone, and we can see this other suture I haven't shown you yet. This is called the occipital mastoid suture because it's going to be close to the mastoid process. And there's your spinous process as well. And let me show you this on the exploded skull. So the exploded skull, you can see the frontal bone, parietal bones, and then the occipital bone here. This is the temporal bone here. Squamous suture right here. And then your coronal suture and the sagittal suture and the lambdoid suture, and remember the occipital mastoid suture right here. And that's it for the skull.